Hello everyone, Blogan is here as usual, and in this lesson I'll teach you how to enter or input information into your programs. I'll show you a new tool that can do this, demonstrate how to use it, remind you of one escape sequence, and some other stuff. It's an important lesson because from now on our programs will be interactive. Up to this point, we've been writing programs that could create some data, change the values of the data, and display it on the screen along with other information. Such programs are quite boring because the user of these programs doesn't interact with them. Interactive programs are more popular. In them, programs constantly communicate with the user, ask him to enter certain data, he enters it, they somehow process it, and give him other information. An example of such programs is a calculator. To get the result of some operation, you, as a user, must first enter data and also specify the operation. Only after this, the calculator processes your data and produces the desired result. Since we're working with a console, throughout the course, the only device for entering information into the program will be the keyboard. The console simply doesn't support other devices. But after this course, you can always study other libraries and programs at any time that help process input from a mouse, microphone, and so on. Well, to be more precise, a file can also be a source of information input, and in this course we will learn how to read information from files and write it there. But it won't be soon. You already know that stdcout is a tool that can output information to the console. There's another tool in the IO stream file, stdcin. If cout means characters output, then cin means characters input, and it's thanks to it we'll read information from the keyboard. There are also other tools for outputting information such as stdcr and stdclog, or functions from the C language such as scanf or printf, which we'll look at in the following lessons. How can we use stdcin? To begin with, you should understand that you need to first create a variable in which you want to write values from the keyboard. This is the same logic as stdcout. You can't display non-existent variables on the screen any more than you can enter values from the keyboard into non-existent variables. Okay, let's imagine that we created a variable. Now we can write a command to enter information into it. This is done in the following way: stdcin, two right-angle brackets, the name of your variable, and a semicolon at the end. Notice that the brackets here are pointing the other way. They seem to emphasize in which direction the information is going. In this case, you can imagine that stdcin is a keyboard or console, and information is sent from it to your variable. But how does this command actually work? Remember that the computer executes commands one by one from top to bottom. Therefore, first the computer will execute all the commands that will be written above this one. And when it reaches this command, the program will stop, a blinking cursor will appear on the screen, and the program will wait for data input. You'll have to enter the data, press enter, and only then the value will be written to the variable. After this, the following commands will begin to be executed. Don't forget that you can enter data from the keyboard as much as you want and anywhere in the code, as long as you create the variable earlier. Let's look at a more complete example of data input. Here I use everything we've studied before. First, see how I separated different parts of the code with a blank line and wrote a simple comment that explains what each block of code is about. This improves the readability of the code. The second thing to note is that every time before the data input command, I explain to the user what he should enter. Imagine that this information is not here. How can someone who has never seen your code know what to enter? He just can't. That's why I always try to explain to the user what he should enter. In this example, I'm asking for different numbers here, here, and here. And here I ask you to enter a symbol. Also notice that I create variables before entering information every time. They don't have to be created immediately in front of the command. They can be created anywhere as long as they exist. In the first block, a number is entered, after which it's displayed on the screen. Let's run the program and see how it works. You can see the cursor blinking. This means that the program waits until we enter information. Let's write any number and press enter. Immediately after this, the program will write your value to a variable and continue working. Everything should be pretty simple. In the second block, I wrote a simple calculator that asks you to enter two numbers, after which the program will display their sum. Let's enter and see. Everything works fine. In the last block, I ask you to enter a character. You should know that stdcin can work with almost all data types that we know, namely bool, short, unsigned short, int, unsigned int, long, unsigned long, long long, unsigned long long, float, double, long double, and char. stdcin can't work with the types wchar-t, char-at, char-16t, char-32t, but we don't need them. Is it possible to enter a value into a constant? Of course not, just like in a literal. Firstly, you're breaking the rules of the C++ language, and secondly, this makes no sense and the compiler will give you an error. You can only enter values from the keyboard into a variable. Do you remember that you can build an output chain thanks to stdcout in this way? So we can do the same with stdcin. Let's imagine that we need to enter two values at once into the calculator. I rewrote the code and we can do it like this. In this case, you see two separate commands, but when running, the user must enter a second value after the first. There are several ways to do this. First, you can type the first one, press enter, and type the second one, and press enter again. But here's something interesting for you to do. stdcin will accept any whitespace characters between numbers. When you enter values into the console, they're all regular characters, meaning you are simply entering text. It's stdcin that turns it into numbers. And when you press enter, you simply insert the /n character into this text. stdcin takes it as a signal to finish entering a number. But you can enter multiple values either through one space or through several spaces. stdcin will understand everything and process this text correctly. The main thing is at the end, after entering the last number, press enter. That's sorted out, so you can still write like this and everything will work exactly the same, only now the code is shortened. Now you know two ways to enter multiple values. You can choose the one you like the best. We need to take a closer look at how stdcin processes input. I repeat, everything you enter into the console from the keyboard is plain text of the char data type. All this text is stored in a special memory area called the input buffer. When the stdcin command is executed, it first looks to see if there is anything in that buffer. If there is, it starts reading the information and you won't even be able to enter the value. But if this buffer is empty, only then you're given the opportunity to fill it. Well, it's clear that initially it's empty. Let's imagine that we have whitespace characters in the buffer before a number. Then stdcin will simply discard them. For example, if I now run the program and enter several spaces and only then a number, then the number will be written to the variable just fine because stdcin discarded the first spaces anyway. The same will happen with enter and tab. So cin has reached the numbers and starts reading them from the buffer. As soon as it encounters /n, it will stop, the buffer will become empty and the number will be written normally. But you can break stdcin if you enter incorrect information. How can you do that? First, enter information that cin didn't ask for. In this example, you told cin to read a number that is suitable for type int. This means that you must enter either only numbers or the minus sign and numbers. Let's try to introduce something different. This is where cin encounters a symbol that doesn't fit, and several things happen. It leaves the buffer full, it writes the value 0 to the variable itself, and it breaks. What does breaks mean? This means that you can't now enter other values at all. For example, if I write cin again and run it, you will notice that the second time it didn't even let me enter the values. Another option to break it is to enter characters not at the beginning but in the middle or end of the text. In this case, it reads the digits from the buffer, makes a number out of them, writes it to a variable and stops. But it will not break. But this doesn't save us much because there are other symbols in the buffer, and the second time it looks at the buffer, it will definitely break. Therefore, here's some advice for you. Enter into Cin the values it asks for. Of course, Cin can be fixed. To do this, you need to know how to tell Cin so that it's not afraid to read values again and be able to clear the buffer, the input buffer. Perhaps in future lessons I'll show you this, but now this information will be difficult for us. The last thing I'd like to show you is the escape sequence /b. If you don't remember what it does, let me remind you. It moves the cursor back one position. We can use this together with Cin to enter information more beautifully. For example, here, I ask to enter the user's salary and add a few underscores for beauty. But the problem is that if I run the program, the input cursor will be located next to the last underscore, and I want the user to enter information where the first underscore is. To do this, we need to move the cursor back a few positions, and for this, I can use this escape sequence. Each individual /b moves the cursor back one position, so I write as many of them as there are underscores. Now, when you run the program, the cursor will blink in the right place. Of course, after entering a number and deleting it, the underscores will disappear, but nevertheless, at least we got it this way. To summarize, if you want to enter information from the keyboard into your program, then you use stdcin. You can only enter information into existing variables. When you enter information, it's stored in the console's text buffer, from which stdcin pulls characters one by one and tries to turn them into a variable data type value. And that's the end of this lesson. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, you can support me by liking this video, writing a comment under it, subscribing to the channel, donating using the link in the video description, or becoming a sponsor of my channel. All these things popularize my channel and motivate me to continue recording lessons for you. Goodbye.